SYS presents Adventures in Online Education.
Hello, friends. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. If you're a new listener, thank you from the bottom of my teacher's heart for being here. I know how valuable your time is, and I'm honored you'd share it with my guests and me. And thanks to returning listeners as well. You keep this podcast going. On today's episode, I have 3 talented and thoughtful guests who are going to stretch your thinking and provide you with many an aha moment. Nefertiti Dukes leads the professional development team at Screencastify, where they focus on what video makes possible for classroom educators, not what Screencastify makes possible. Before joining the Screencastify squad, Nef taught middle school and high school humanities, and she has worked with learners of all ages on speech and debate. Alfonso Mendoza serves as an instructional technologist and has received his master's in educational technology, e-learning certification, and technology leadership certification from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, along with his technology director certificate from TCEA. He is currently working on his doctorate in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in educational technology. Alfonso is also one of less than 3,000 Google Innovators worldwide and was named one of the top 50 EdTech Influencers on Augmented Reality in K-12 worth a follow in 2021. Jodi Miller is a former high school biology teacher and current PhD student at the Johns Hopkins University School of Education. She also created WellCheck, WELLCHEQ, an online platform that allows students and teachers to log their feelings each day. Jodi is passionate about rethinking the ways in which schools support students. Her research focuses on how stress affects the brains and bodies of learners and how it is related to achievement. She also examines how schools can serve as a buffer for students who may be experiencing a lot of stress and trauma. So, are you ready? Let's learn something new. Welcome, guests! I am so excited to have the 3 of you here. We have Nef, we have Jodi, we have Fonz. They are so near and dear to my heart, not just in the Twitter world, but in the real world. And so I am excited for the audience to hear your ideas today and for you all to be able to share ideas in the same space. So you 3, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Excited to be here.
Yes, this is going to be so good. So I'm not going to do any small talk today. We are just diving in because this is too good to delay. I'm going to present 4 different scenarios today, and we're going to get the perspective of these 3 brilliant minds here in the room on how they would address these scenarios. So let's get started. Scenario 1, here we go. You're an online teacher. You have a small group of students or families who just don't engage with you in a meaningful way yet. They come to class now and again, so you do periodically see them in Zoom, but they don't do any assignments. You've tried calling, you've tried emailing, you've sent direct messages in your LMS, but nothing seems to work. What would the teacher's next move be, or what questions would the teacher be asking themselves? Jodi, I'm curious your perspective first.
Sure. So I think this was a really big issue that many educators faced in the last year and a half plus, especially when all schools were virtual, meaning like schools that may not even have been prepared to be in this virtual space. The first thing that always comes to my mind is what's going on. So what is happening in the students' lives that has made it difficult for them to kind of show up to school in all the different ways? So my first step is always kind of checking on their mental health and just checking in like, what's going on? How are you doing? Is there anything that I can do to help? Do you need anything? And can we diagnose the issue together? So maybe they feel overwhelmed by the workload. Maybe there are things going on at home. Maybe there are food insecurity issues, and really try to present myself as a teammate. It's not confrontational. It's not judgmental. Just like, I'm here on your team. How do we help you get to where you need to be? And when they do show up, I'm really happy to see you. And it's so wonderful to have you here. Finding other ways, what are some of their strengths that I can tap into or leverage when they do show up so they feel like they're part of our community, and really thinking about how do we capitalize on all the wonderful parts of them that already exist? How do we utilize that to help them feel more part of the community, but also more connected to school? But for me, it always starts with what's going on and what's getting in the way of you reaching your potential.
Yeah, I really, I'll kind of jump in here, Jody. I really love what you said. And just to kind of add a little bit to that, for me, it's always been, connections before content. And that's so important. Now, what happened is just to kind of, teachers, this was a new experience to them, like you said. And they really, all they did is just transferred the skills that they did have in brick and mortar to online. And that quite did not go as we thought it would, because they're just simply, it's just that knowledge transfer, muscle memory, and putting it in an online setting. But what a lot of them didn't realize, and I think, Jody, you hit on this too, that we didn't really take the time to know our students first, build that community, build those connections. And, for me, I always told teachers we need to be very cautious, because now we are guests in our students' homes. Oftentimes, those 6 to 8 hours that they are with us may be the safest 6 to 8 hours that they are in school. But now they're introducing us to their home life. And like you mentioned, we don't know what is happening at home. We don't know their circumstances. We don't know all of that. And so we definitely needed to make those connections prior. And like you said, acknowledging that students are showing up and building up on their strengths to kind of set the tone and build that community. So I really love what you said there, Jody.
I love the community coming from both Jodi and Fonz. I have to admit that my mind went a little bit to a different space. And I started to think, does this kid actually have a literal connection, right? Like, do they have access to technology? Do they have stable Wi-Fi? Are they potentially sharing a device? And that's why they're able to show up sometimes and not others. And I think what's interesting about what everyone has said is that we all are trying to diagnose the root cause. We're not upset that they're not turning in their assignments, that they're not coming to the Zoom meeting. We're like, hey, what is getting in the way and how do I help you? Whether that is being in your corner, offering food or resources, saying, how can we get you connected with Wi-Fi? But all of those things, I think, are coming from the same place of what's the problem here? What's the barrier? How do we break it down?
Absolutely. It's really cool to hear the three of you say that. Like, you're all coming at it from a place of curiosity. Go ahead, Jody.
I just wanted to hop in and say, I think, like, Neff, that was such a good point that I didn't think about. And that's not where my mind first goes, is thinking about like connectivity and that like very essential, like, can you even log into class? And I love that you brought that up, because to me, it just represents how schools are communities and villages, in that every teacher has a different perspective and a unique strength that they bring to each student and the larger community. And it's so important that we leverage each other and the strengths that we have, because that perspective is different from my perspective, but very valuable and really thoughtful. And I'm like, why didn't I even think about that? And to me, it just is such a testament to how we're all this like beautiful quilt of different colors that like fit together to make something wonderful.
Well said, Jody. I can't even expound upon that. That was perfect. Yeah, I think when you get another perspective too, you all approached it in that inquisitive way, but then to grab a peer and let them know the scenario and say, all right, this is what I've asked myself, or this is what I've asked the family. What would you ask? And then that's opening the door to further exploration and to hopefully further connection. Awesome. All right, let's try another scenario that's really common. Let's say you have about 30 students in your class, and during live sessions, you want to be able to see the students thinking and how they're working through, say, a math problem. You want to honor the fact that some students and families are tech savvy, And others are still learning the basics of the tools. Some work well with peers, maybe others need to process alone. What are some moves a teacher could make in order to see students' thought process, see how they're doing while honoring their individual differences? Let's start with Fonz.
This is a great scenario. And oftentimes I think it's many people just the fear of like, oh my gosh, 30 students that I have and they all learn differently. And just to kind of preface this, when I came into teaching, I didn't go through a traditional college of education. I actually came from a business background and working in marketing and coming in. So my strategy when I first started 16 years ago was I have 30 different customers that I have to sell my subject to, and they're not all going to buy it the same way. So this scenario really kind of resonates with me. And for me, I was all about customer service and respecting my customers. And in this case, I respect my students, I respect their strengths, and I'm there to help them through those areas that they may struggle with. So for myself, I'd be more of that risk taker of saying, okay, if I have my students that are working well independently, depending on the LMS that I may be using, or just saying, hey, okay, if you guys can work independently, let's go ahead and I'll give you your independent time to practice. However, we do have some tools available where you can go ahead and record your thought process through a math problem that you can go ahead and submit to me. So I would accept any different or different modalities of that thought process as a grade or just to check for understanding. And then for those students that really needed that little one-to-one, we can either set up breakout rooms where I can work with those that we can go ahead and work in a small group while still respecting those that can work independently. And as long as they show me evidence of their thought process, whether it's through a screencast, whether it's even just on paper, and then they can just share it with me, or if I'm working with them independently, that way I can know and gauge based on their strengths how well they're doing, or where I myself as a teacher may find that I may have done or maybe taught a way or a concept. Maybe there was a misconception there and I can go ahead and correct myself as well. But for me, it's just that excitement of giving them the opportunity to create and giving them their own voice and choice in the learning, but with the common goal of understanding the concept.
I'm with Fonz there. I think that student choice is the obvious answer here and is so amazing at being able to increase engagement, even if we weren't in a scenario where some students had some proficiency with tech and others didn't. I think what I would add to this conversation is I want to drill down a little bit on the fact that some students are tech savvy and others are not. I want to offer choice, but I don't want that choice to be foreclosed. In other words, a kid might be like, I really want to create a screencast, but I can't because I don't know how to. So I think I would say yes, and let's offer choice, and let's also provide an opportunity to correct some of these proficiencies. So maybe that's me creating a video that shows a kid how to create a screencast. Or maybe there's somebody who doesn't know how to create a photo and upload that to an LMS. So how can I teach that so that theoretically all of my students have equal access to all of the choices that I've put before them?
I love what both of you said so much because it focuses on giving students choice, voice, and agency, but also helping them fill in gaps in their own knowledge that they may be intimidated to otherwise try to learn, but making it easier for them. One thing I was thinking about, especially in terms of like, do students prefer to work with peers or by themselves, is it's really helpful to get an inventory. I try really early on when I was teaching to understand different preferences of students and give them different options for working with people. One thing I really loved doing, especially as students got to know each other, is see if could you help somebody else? I loved watching students help each other, and or is there someone you feel comfortable working with? And so maybe we can like slowly move you out of your comfort zone, and this is somebody you can partner with. And just trying to understand maybe what are the obstacles, but also balancing both like, this is your preference and I respect that, but also part of us moving through the school process is learning how to step outside of our comfort zone and how to work with new people. And maybe that can be you helping somebody else, maybe somebody else helping you. You can think about what way works best, but trying to also respect their choice, but move them into a space that will help them develop new skills.
moving out of a comfort zone while also respecting a preference. I really like that idea. And I appreciate what the three of you said about giving choice and voice to students, but also that part about agency. It reminds me of the couple of episodes back, we did a recast of a UDL episode we had done season 1. And my guest, Tim Baddock, talked about how he gave students all these choices. And he's a veteran online teacher. But then, like Neff pointed out, his pitfall was that one of the choices he didn't provide the kids with the training to really do that piece proficiently. So you have those students who didn't quite have the tech skills to do the creative work that they were interested in doing. And so I think that's a really important consideration for new and veteran online teachers, because we all can just make assumptions. Same thing in scenario 1, right? We kind of go to our own assumptions and we ask questions based on our assumptions. Here too, even if maybe we've done the inventory in the fall, kids have changed a little, or their preferences have changed, or they're comfortable with something now that they weren't before. So kind of checking our assumptions. And again, I think it goes back to collaboration with our peers and letting someone else take a look at that assignment or take a look at what we're planning and say, what would you do differently here? Or what am I missing? So I so appreciate the three of you. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I have 2 more riveting scenarios for you. And I just can't wait to hear your thoughts. Stick with us. What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales@syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. Welcome back, amazing listeners. We are here with 3 guests today. We have Nef Dukes, we have Fonz Mendoza, we have Jodi Miller. They are awesome in the field of education and with their understanding of technology. And I have 2 more scenarios for them. So here we go. Scenario 3. You are trying to flip your high school classroom, but when you make your videos, they get too long. And you suspect kids probably aren't watching them the whole way through. You're struggling to simply make them shorter because you can only speak so quickly. What could this teacher do differently to ensure that they're getting the most out of their asynchronous instruction, that they're covering all the material they need, but they're also keeping kids actively engaged? Neff, let's start with you. What's your move here?
Yeah, so I was mindlessly scrolling through TikTok yesterday, which is the source of all wisdom in my life lately.
Oh, yes.
And there was an awesome teacher on there who made an amazing point that often what we think students will find engaging, they don't find engaging. And what we think that they'll find boring, they think is absolutely riveting. So our assumptions about that can often be wrong. So I think my first move here is to survey my students. Do they think that the videos have been too long? Are there particular things that they really enjoy about the videos thus far, or things that they hate? And that might be a source of truth. And I think it goes back to something that Fonz said a little bit earlier. They are my consumer. They are my audience. So the more that I can learn about what they like, the better material I'll be able to create. But beyond incorporating those ideas into the videos, I think that there are also some things that we can do with technology here. So perhaps using a platform that tells me whether or not students are watching the videos. Something like Screencastify or Edpuzzle might provide those analytics that I would need to be able to determine where engagement falls off. Or doing something like adding questions or interactive components to the video would also be awesome, not only as a way to check for understanding, but also to create those natural breaks in instruction that we would have if we were teaching synchronously. So that's where my mind goes initially, but I have to say that I'm really, really excited to see what Jodi and Fonz might say here.
Nev, it's funny because I don't feel like I was an EdTech expert by any means, and I still don't. And you're so good at what you do, the way you think about what you were just talking about for the different apps that people can use to track analytics. I was so mind blown because it totally makes sense, but not what I would have thought about, which is so great. My thought was similarly to what you were saying, like adding questions. So sometimes what I would do is give my students YouTube videos and have questions throughout them that were relevant in content. Sometimes I had timestamps because I think it could be it's like a scaffolding that could be easier for students. You also, of course, can see students like skip to where they need to be, but the goal is making sure that all students are able to achieve success. And so you can like leave some timestamps in, some timestamps out. Something also I thought about was perhaps assigning partners or finding some way to maybe like split it and have one half teach the other half or something where you can make it engaging. It's a tough challenge, and I don't think I always had great solutions other than trying to break it up, sometimes sprinkling in challenges or questions so they know what to expect at the end or like 3/4 of the way through, and say like a code word or something so they kind of stay engaged because they know that like I'm going to say something or that perhaps they can find a way to get credit for or some kind of like joke or riddle or something. But other than that, I'm excited to hear what Fonz says because I know he's also excellent at EdTech.
Thank you, guys. And like I said, I do agree with a lot of what you all said. I mean, it just really goes with my practice and what I've been showing teachers or sharing with them is that oftentimes, we're used to being the sage on the stage, but sometimes we just need to be more of that facilitator. So taking into account, like you said, the different learning styles, and like Neff said, these are your consumers and they've been in school, depending on what grade you may teach, for several years. So they can be really great at giving you feedback at what works for them as far as the videos are concerned. And they can be, your best, I guess, critic in that sense of how you as a teacher can go ahead and adjust your videos. And I really love what Neff said, where you can just sprinkle on a little bit of some of that awesome sauce through Screencastify, through Edpuzzle, and you can go ahead and make those videos a little bit more engaging. But one of the things that I did also let my teachers know is like flip it around on them. Have them create some videos or video tutorials and then have them also participate in the learning. So I know through Edpuzzle, the students can go ahead and create their own tutorial videos. And I think that was very fascinating where we had some teachers in our district that just flipped the script where we said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a lecture. Here's the main point. But now I would love for you to share what you found that was interesting, but you're going to make it in sort of a tutorial on if there's a concept here, reteach it in your own words and in your own way that may be relevant to the rest of the class. And maybe using something that is trending at that time that oftentimes as teachers, we may not be so active on social media, so we may not know what is trending and so on, but just make it available and you just kind of become a community and now you're learning from one another. So as a teacher, that's going to help me where now, some of the students may go peer to peer to ask questions for correction. And then that would allow me some time if I need to work with some of those students that are one-to-one, I can work with them. But we are all engaged in the learning. So, I mean, like I said, there's several ways that we can go with this, but I loved everything that you guys added. And I just sprinkled on a little bit of extra sauce there for y'all.
I want to add one more thing here, if that's okay. As you guys were talking, I think Jodi said something around kids might be skipping through. And I think what's interesting about that is perhaps we want to question our assumption that kids watching the entire video is actually to be desired. So I think a little bit about some of the things that I watch purely for informational purposes. The other day, I'm watching a YouTube video about how to fix an RV furnace. And I skipped through the first 2 minutes because that was information that I already had. So if students are doing that and they have enough information to be able to say, hey, this is what I already know, therefore I don't need this part of the video, perhaps them skipping through is actually something to be celebrated rather than something that we might want to fix.
And just another note that was found very interesting, one of my courses that I'm taking in my studies is it actually showed that even students that watch a lecture at 2 times the speed can learn just as easily as if they just watch it at regular speed. And I've always been one of those that I like to put like 1.5 speed if I'm going through something, and I'm still able to learn and capture what the message is saying or what it is that I'm trying to learn. So it was very interesting how, a lot of students can learn that way. They just like, hey, let me speed this up and I just get the content that I need and I'm good to go.
That's such a great point, both of you. I think that's such a good idea, an important thought to challenge our assumptions that like it's inherently bad that they're skipping through. So I think that's really, thank you, because that like changed my perspective and my thinking. I didn't mention this earlier, but Fonz also brought it up. I love the idea of asking students their feedback on the videos and what their perspective is, because so often we think we know, but we don't know. And also the loud voices that may be frustrated, critical, or whatever may just be one or two. So then we feel like something's not working or we need to change something, but perhaps that's not the consensus, even though those are the loudest voices in the room, perhaps. So I thought that was such a great, so it's like a simple idea, but such a great idea.
The simple ones are always the winners, right? Less is more, keep it simple. All of those cliches are just so darn true. It's annoying. So, yes, I'm with you. I love the idea of, I'm so appreciative, Fonz, that you come initially from a different background than just straight up education. You weren't like me. You weren't nerdily, who was just going to college to become a teacher and just couldn't stop going to school. Like you're like, hey, I have other interests too. And because that different perspective is really valuable, to think of students as consumers. At first you might feel a little uncomfortable at that idea, like, wait, no, that's not okay. But it actually really is, because they are our customers. And if we treat them as such, if we treat them, even though maybe you feel they don't have a choice, they're put in your classroom and it is what it is, but if we treat them as if they do have that choice and they could go elsewhere, or that it's really our obligation to keep our classroom in business, right? And we want to do that by attracting our customers and getting consumer feedback and catering to the needs of our customers, all of that. It's really humbling. And I think that's really important. And I so appreciate how the three of you can look at something from slightly different angles, but then also end up coming to a really similar conclusion about it. Like, we need to listen to kids, we need to check our assumptions, we need to get that constant feedback. This is so helpful. Okay, I have one more scenario for you. You're a teacher. You're struggling to build a classroom community in your online setting. You could be a veteran online teacher. You could be brand new to it. You could be remote teaching, whatever it is. You're trying to build that community. It's just not happening. Kids maybe are respectful to one another in class for the most part, but you feel like you're just not really connecting with your students. Also, there definitely are days when kids are what we call spamming the chat, right? Or using disrespectful language to one another. That's definitely happening here and there. You have students from a variety of backgrounds in your class, and you're finding that culturally there are disconnects among the students that can lead to disruptions in class. At the end of the day, you want to know your students, you want to know their families better, you want your students to know one another better as well, and you're just trying to build some trust and some open communication. What might be a smart move there? Whoever wants to jump in first, just go for it.
All right. Well, I'll just kind of jump in just because I don't know. I like to keep it simple. And I said, oftentimes, like, I feel like I may oversimplify things, but I think it's just really number one. For me, I was like, just do an About Me project. As cheesy as it may sound, honestly, it's like, oh, everybody does the About Me. But this is a way to build that community. The more you know from one another and you get to learn your culture, you get to learn new things, you get to learn from your peers that although you may not see them in person, maybe this is a school where you are states apart or miles apart, you may never see each other face to face. When will be the next time that you get to interact with the person that is there in front of you for that class for that year? And wouldn't you want to know more about them, to know, maybe for myself, I may never go to that different state or see some of the things that they see, and I may not have that opportunity. So really taking the time in the beginning to make those connections, not only for myself as a teacher with every single one of my students, but also giving them the opportunity to make those connections with one another through those projects, whether it be tell your about me either through a video, or you can create, a Google slide, you can create a presentation, so on and so forth, but giving everybody that opportunity. And then I would just simply keep that somewhere available, those projects where people can revisit those at later times and get to know each other a little bit more and open up those lines of communication. And as far as the classroom culture, setting the expectations in the beginning and just being open, honest, and real. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to yell. You don't have to be, but just working with them and making it a team, making it a community. Like, I'm not here, to just direct everything. We're here to work together, and maybe we can come up with somewhat of an online social contract as far as behavior is concerned, how to check ourselves to make sure that we don't do any of the spamming, things of that sort. So that's just me kind of keeping it a little simple in that aspect.
Fonz, I love keeping it simple there. I think that I have a similar simple idea here. I am zeroing in on the fact that kids are spamming the chat and using disrespectful language. To me, that lends itself to creating some community norms, which is exactly what Fonz said. And I think also giving kids the opportunity to speak around things that may not be directly related to the content. So my mind goes to maybe creating a Flipgrid question where we ask students what's their favorite ice cream, or maybe doing something similar in Screencastify Submit to give them the opportunity to speak to each other. And the reason that I'm recommending those two tools is I think that it's important that when we start this effort, that it be asynchronous, so that I, as the teacher, can go in, see those videos, see where students might be breaking that community norm, and be able to correct them. I think part of what makes this really, really hard is that this is all happening in real time for this teacher. So they're attempting to correct some of this misbehavior, allow students to get to know each other while also teaching the content. And if we can divorce those things, even for just a tiny second, we might be able to actually get some real connections here and get to the point where we can have these discussions synchronously. So that's where my mind goes.
I love both of those ideas, the getting to know you and then the kind of asynchronous opportunity to allow students to engage in non-class content. There were a few things that I was thinking about. One is kind of similar to what Neff was saying. One thing I did with my students was I would come up with these non-significant kind of dilemmas, like the cafeteria sells a lot of pizza, but the school thinks it's unhealthy. Should they get rid of it? And kind of have them debate or have conversations around something that has very low stakes. I think even starting something like that asynchronously can be really positive. I think lots of one-on-one conversations, especially after reviewing the norms and people who are continuously violating the norms, trying to talk to them about why is that not okay behavior? Also, one thing that I try to do both with the larger group but also individuals is really teach and model empathy. And so thinking about why would this not be helpful behavior? How would you feel if someone spoke to you like this or spoke to someone you love like this? And helping students kind of bring it back to put it in a frame that makes sense to them, because I think that sometimes at that age, you're not able to appreciate what it might feel like to somebody else for them to be hurt, but bringing it back to if someone did this to you, can you appreciate why it might be offensive and then why it might bother them? And one thing that I've also seen, which is really cool, is with well-checked data, and not to bring up well-checked, but the part that I really loved was that teachers have been able to show students their community well-being and talk about this is how we as a community are feeling. And so make sure you're checking on your friends, because some people may be feeling sad or angry or lonely, and then talking about how do we support one another. And I think that without calling students out, but showing how we're doing as a community does help bond us, because you realize that you're not the only one feeling a certain way. And I've been really amazed because that was something that teachers did on their own. And I was really inspired by that, because I think it does help us all become humans again with feelings, which again brings us back to the empathy and hopefully dissuades students from engaging in some of that behavior. Something else I had thought about is like role playing or kind of social problem solving in small groups and breakout rooms. So how would we handle some of these issues? Just getting students to talk in smaller groups and build some of those relationships and think about non-content related challenges that might help them build trust with one another without super high stakes. Just get them communicating.
These are awesome ideas. And I really appreciate you saying, Jodi, that we're human. And if we can see each other's humanity, that's also really helpful, because sometimes when you're in that online setting, just having that barrier that you're not physically with the person, that can have an effect that we're not always readily aware of. And so bringing back that empathy is really important. And I also appreciate how simple Nef and Fonz and Jodi, the three of you, your suggestions are, because they get right to the heart of the issue. Like, let's create a contract then. Let's do an About Me project. Let's survey the community and see how we are doing, and recognize that some folks are having a hard time and others are feeling okay. So how can we have empathy for one another and work forward? This is really, really helpful. I appreciate all the very tangible and actionable advice you've given listeners today. And it's also really practical, which I always appreciate. So, three of you, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, I'd love to know, how can listeners get in touch with you? Let's start with Nef and then Jodi and then Fonz. Nef, if folks want to reach out to you, where do they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. I am at Nifty Nef, and always down to have a conversation about any and all things.
I echo that sentiment. I love meeting new people and talking. You can find me at Jodes39, Jodes 39 on Twitter, or at Checkwell, which is well check backwards. But either way, you can find me pretty easily. And feedback, thoughts, questions, I love all of it. So I'm here for it.
Excellent. And you can find me at My EdTech Life on all social media. And you can also check out our podcast at myedtech.life. And again, as always, just always happy to connect and collaborate on anything and just have just amazing conversations. So thank you so much.
You three are awesome. Thanks for coming together today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guests today, Nef Dukes, Jodi Miller, and Fonz Mendoza. These three taught us that we should treat our students like customers, and about the importance of asking what's going on from a place of curiosity and care when our students are struggling. We learned that providing students with voice, choice, and agency requires well-thought-out planning, and that we all do better when we collaborate with peers for the benefit of our students. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. Also, if you haven't before, head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter from me to you with an episode-related thought or two to inspire and encourage you. Want to connect? On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. I love hearing from you. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS Education and our products and services, head to syseducation.org. Lastly, this podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including our dream team, sound engineer Natalie Farrell, graphic designer and social media and website manager Lexi Boren, and producer Bo Neal. Thanks for listening today, and remember, we can learn new things.
Thanks for listening.